Welcome to another thrilling episode of Housing Development, Nigeria's #1 guide to housing information. Shelter is one of the basic necessities of life. That is why I make it my top priority to keep you informed on trending news in the housing sector. Are you a tenant that wants to own a house, a businessman or woman, or a landlord that wants to upgrade from owning a one-room apartment to a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment? Then this program is for you. Stay tuned, let's discuss housing and all that concerns it right after the trending news in the housing sector. I am Flora, your housing diva.
Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria (FMBN) has begun construction of the pilot phase of a low-cost housing program for civil servants nationwide. The managing director of FMBN, Ahmed Dangiwa, who performed the groundbreaking ceremony for the scheme on Wednesday in Nasarawa State, said it will deliver 1,400 housing units nationwide. Mr. Dangiwa said about 200 units will be constructed in each of the 6 geopolitical zones in the country, in addition to extras in Lagos and Abuja. Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Malam Muhammad Musa Bello, has solicited for housing loans for staff of the Federal Capital Territory Administration, FCTA. Speaking during a courtesy visit to the Executive Secretary of the Federal Government Staff Housing Loans Board, Dr. Mrs. Hanatu Adamu Fika, Bello reiterated his concern and commitment to the welfare of staff of the administration. Represented by the Executive Secretary, Federal Capital Development Authority (FCDA), Engineer Umar Gambo Jibrin, the minister expressed appreciation on the good works being done by the board, which is geared towards the provision of houses for public servants at affordable prices. And in Ghana, the government has announced a new mortgage regime which will enable more people to take up mortgage facilities with interest rate below 20%. According to Works and Housing Minister Samuel Atta-Akie, government is currently drafting a legislative instrument to allow it use part of the pensions fund to support banks in the sale of affordable housing units to Ghanaians. The country currently faces a housing deficit of 1.7 million, a figure government is trying to reduce. Commercial banks are charging between 25 and 35% interest on mortgage loans, a figure analysts say is too high for the ordinary Ghanaian.
Well, a good move there by the Minister of FCT, soliciting for housing loans for staff of the Federal Capital Territory Administration. The greatest desire of every civil servant is to have a place to call home before and after retirement. For more on the news details, visit www.housingnews.org.ng for 247 up-to-date housing information. Welcome back. Natural resources are manifold, with land being the most abundant precious resource to most societies. Less developed countries are attempting to catch up with more developed countries in terms of economic growth, which is often linked to land development. According to the words of Abraham Lincoln, the greatest fine act of the future will be making a comfortable living from a small piece of land. How easy is it to access land in Nigeria for housing development? What are the challenges and bottlenecks involved? Take a listen to this.
Through the period of agriculture to the period of industrial development, land has remained the most valuable property in the life of man and his development. It is a source of wealth to those who have it and the mother of all properties. In other words, virtually all the basic needs of human existence are land dependent. It is therefore clear why different countries all over the world have evolved land tenure and land administration system to administer their lands. There is no doubt that land is the most vital ingredient of national socio-economic development. Land is wealth, no matter its nature or conditions. No land is ever without a purpose. This is because on it depends every economic activity. How a community or country utilizes land determines the level and kind of economic development that takes place in that community or country. In view of the importance and usefulness of land to man and his development, as well as development of his society, every person generally desires to acquire and own a portion of land to achieve the various ends for which the land is meant. In Nigeria, we have had various land tenure systems which are geared towards proper and easy land administration and management from colonial era to Land Use Act of 1978. According to Land Use Act of 1978, all lands in the state is vested in the governor of the state, but the act categorically stated that the land is to be held in trust for the citizens, and the means of enforcing such rights are provided in section 39 and 41.
The Land Use Act is a failure. When the Land Use Act was promulgated in 1978, for those of us in the profession, real estate profession, we did not accept the Land Use Act. It was very unpopular at that time. And that, to my mind, is why it was put in the Constitution. I believe if Land Use Act is not part of Constitution, it would have long been changed to follow the dynamics of investment in real estate.
Over the decades, there have been problems encountered in acquisition of lands and subsequently in obtaining the approval of certificates of occupancy and housing delivery in Nigeria. In the commencement of Land Use Act 1978, it was stated that whereas it is in the public interest that the rights of all Nigerians to the land of Nigeria be asserted and preserved by law.
You can't build a house without the land. The land policy has to also be addressed. Every Nigerian should have a right to a plot of land to live on.
The act has remained a sore point in Nigerians' quest to acquire land for building in most urban areas, and a major hindrance in real estate development and transaction in the country. Under the act, the overwhelming powers granted the governors over land have been blamed for the country's seemingly insurmountable housing problems. Most of the time, the certificates of occupancy which confers ownership of land on individuals are given to the highest bidder instead of those that actually need the land. In some states, obtaining a certificate of occupancy has become a herculean task these days.
My advice to the present government is that the issue of land acquisition, land ownership must be addressed.
Every person requires land for his support, preservation and self-actualization within the general ideals of the society. Land is the foundation of shelter, food and employment. Virtually every form of investment or development by government and private entities is dependent upon land in one way or another. It is now generally accepted that poor land administration can impede economic development and social welfare.
African Union is very interested on the issue of land policy, because if we have land policy, we'll be able to address all these issues, protecting the right of women, protecting the right of the less privileged people, and ensuring that every Nigerian will be able to have access to land. It is the land policy that will do it.
According to World Bank estimates, Nigeria needs to produce about 720,000 housing units annually for the next 20 years to be able to close the housing gap in the country. Therefore, government should continue to hold land in trust and to administer them for use and for the common benefit of Nigerians. But the excessive powers that are vested in governors be reduced and a mechanism or adequate laws for check and balance in their activities be introduced so as to address the issue of governors abusing the act by way of allocating title deeds of land at will for personal and political gains. By so doing, a common man on the street will have easy access or right of acquiring land for himself, rather than making acquisition of land the privilege of the elites.
According to Chapter 202 of the Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 1990, the Land Use Act is an act to vest all lands comprising the territory of each state solely to the governor of the state, who would hold such land and trust for the people and will henceforth be responsible for allocation in all urban areas to individual residents in the state. Acquiring land in Nigeria is tough and one of the biggest challenges to housing development. Experts have called for the Land Use Act to be expunged from the Constitution to make its amendment more realistic and less cumbersome. Watch this.
Very, very important. Every law should be made subject to amendment. The Land Use Act was promulgated in the year 19 as a military edict in the year 1978. And from 1978 to today, nothing has happened to that act. Meanwhile, our economy have been growing astronomically, so there are provisions in the act that have inhibited development. And that's why my profession is in the forefront of those who are calling for that act to be removed from the Constitution and be made subject to amendments to reflect the current economic trends and developments in our nation, Nigeria.
Yes, I'm in support of the amendment of the Land Use Act for the simple reason that it will make it more easier. In fact, I will even propose that the Land Use Act be expunged from the Constitution.
We believe that if the Land Use Act is expunged from the Constitution and allowed to operate on its own, then we can actually begin to reap true values for what we have on landed properties. So I agree that the Land Use Act should be amended.
I do. There are some provisions there that needs amendments, but at least it should not be totally repealed. Yeah. There are some sections of it that needs to be looked into, and it's a collective responsibility. We as a state of valuers, we have a role to play. The government to have a role to play, the judiciary, the executive and the legislative. All of us, we need to work hand in hand to make sure that the amendment is beneficial to the citizenry.
You're watching Housing Development, your go-to source for housing information in Nigeria. The need to have access to decent, safe and sanitary housing at an affordable, disposable prices has been a mirage to most Nigerians, especially the middle and low-income segment of the society. What are the factors aggregating for high cost of housing? That is a quiz on Housing Matters today.
You see, what affects home affordability first in Nigeria is the Land Use Act. You see, the Land Use Act is not aligned, there is no liberalization in the land sector, because when you talk of completing a building with something like 1.5 million, but the cost of land may be more than that 1.5 million. The impact of the materials needed for the construction is also another problem. Most of the construction materials are imported, and this is affecting the cost. Exchange rate will affect the price, the various price of building materials. And in a building, talk of a typical building in Nigeria today, maybe 20% of the material content will come from Nigeria. So in that case, you see, we have no control over the cost of completing the building of a building in Nigeria?
The cost of building materials are the basic determination of construction, of housing construction. Every individual having an earning or working somewhere desires to have a house because it is a basic requirement. A house where you put your family. So the smallest units of housing you can think of is a 1-bedroom. And that is going to the lowest income group of the economy that is in this world. Now, what do you need to build that house? You need materials. So if the cost of the materials are not reasonable enough, there is no way it cannot go back to this category of Nigerian. So it's important for the government to keep the cost of materials, minimal enough to enable this low income group that we are looking at to have a house.
The cost of everything is high. And people have this notion that certain materials could be local. But look, what is the most local of all materials? Sand. You see that 80% of the cost of sand is in transportation. It's directly related to exchange rate. So if exchange rate is high, the cost of everything is high, particularly construction. I believe lack of affordability of housing is largely due to high exchange rate. It's the economy, it's the economic structure. Once exchange rate is high, interest rate will be high, and inflation rate will be high. And there is no way you can borrow to build for consumption.
Buildings are made up of 3 core things: materials, labor, plants. Material has the highest percentage, say about 60% of the cost of buildings. And because most materials are imported, therefore it drives up the cost of buildings. The first place to start is by developing local materials to replace imported materials if you want to bring down the cost of buildings to a reasonable level. Then the second is labor. There are many skills we don't have in Nigeria anymore. That's why we go to Benin Republic, go to Ghana to import craftsmen and so on and so forth. All this is add to the cost of buildings. So by the time we begin to look inwards to develop local materials to use, cost of buildings will crash down. And that's where we have to start with. I thank God that government is making an effort, but we have to do some more.
Houses to become affordable, government need to be engaged in acquisition of the land. If government acquires the land, government must also make sure that the infrastructure, roads, pipes, water, electricity that will go there, government must take that lead and provide those aspects.
Among factors listed as contributing to high cost of housing are land acquisition, high cost of building materials, high interest mortgage rates, and infrastructure. We're still talking affordable housing and how it can be achieved in Nigeria. Join the conversation with the link below. Talking of affordable housing, Urban Shelter Limited have for sale affordable houses equipped with modern amenities and facilities and a comfortable and serene environment. Here is a quick one from the Managing Director of Urban Shelter Limited.
We all know home ownership in Nigeria can be particularly difficult for a number of reasons, and I won't go into it. But what we've done as a management team and as in part of Urban Shelter is to really sit down and think to ourselves, well, how do we facilitate that problem? Because it is essentially a challenge. And the most things is we realize a number of developers, you have to pay within 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. So we sat down to really think of a model that would suit. And as far as I know, Urban Shelter is the only company today. We introduced the 5-year repayment plan. This is not a mortgage. There are no interest charges. There are no hidden fees. We go through applications and we see clients that are eligible, and really you are entitled to get a 5-year payment plan on most of our projects. Now, we also sat down to say, how else can we diversify this project? And we developed something called a stay and pay concept, where by the time you pay 2nd to 3rd year of your payment, we will actually allow you to move into your property and pay off the balance while you're enjoying that property with your family. Of course, there are terms and conditions, but again, we have found that this has added that flexibility in home ownership.
To subscribe to any of the housing estate developed by Urban Shelter Limited, call the numbers you see on your TV screen. Also for sale at Arab Road, Kubwa in Abuja is a 2-bedroom block of flats fully completed. You pay and park in immediately. The 2-bedroom block of flats is located in a serene environment with good road network, electricity supply, 24 hours water supply, ample parking spaces, security services. For more details, call the numbers on your TV screen. The Builders Congress 2018, organized by Council of Registered Builders of Nigeria, and induction of new members will be holding on the 26th to the 28th of November 2018. Is a bundle package with conference, exhibition, seminars, technical sessions, award and gala nights. You have an opportunity to exhibit your product and services on the floor of the venue. For exhibition space, call the numbers on your TV screen.
My name is Oniye Chono. I am the first Vice President of the Nigerian Institute of Architects, Permanent Secretary, Federal Ministry of Education. I've been watching this program. Housing Development Program is the flagship program really on TV that focuses on the environment, the built environment, housing, construction, and we want you to keep the job up. We are helping to propagate all the values that we want to bring to address housing and construction issues in the country, and I fully endorse this program.
Thanks for being a part of the program today. You can be part of the conversation by following us on all our social media handles. And as the 2019 election is drawing closer, there is a need for you, for all of us, to ask our political aspirants about the housing agenda. I remain Flora, your housing diva. God bless our dear country, Nigeria.